Good afternoon.
Greetings.
How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. Hope you are.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. May I ask you to tell us your name, please?
Sure. I'm Belle Wheelan.
Excellent. And may I ask you also to share a little bit about yourself, your work, your career, anything that you feel comfortable sharing with us?
Sure. This is the beginning of my 47th year in higher education. I was two when I started.
I love it.
Spent my academic life in professionally in community colleges, going from faculty member to president.
Mhm.
Was president at two different institutions in Virginia and left for a 4 year stint as the Secretary of Education for the state when Mark Warner was elected governor.
Mhm.
Virginia has the only one-term governor in the country, so in year three, everybody's looking for employment, including the governor.
Mhm.
And I was blessed enough to get the job at the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges as president, and that was 16 years ago.
Wow, that's impressive. It's all get out right there. What were some of the challenges that you faced as you traversed through higher education? What were some of the things that stayed with you?
Oh, wow. Personally, I ended up getting a divorce during my move. So that was a challenge that will always stay with me. We had adopted a son when he was 4 months old. And when he was 10 months old, his father decided he didn't want to be married anymore. So I've been a single parent since my son was 10 months old. We kind of grew together in our roles as mother and son.
Mhm.
Professionally, I learned that if you have the credentials and you have the experience, then you just have to look for opportunities and they come to you in unexpected ways at unexpected times. I ended up in my first presidency in Lynchburg, Virginia, which I had never in my life thought I would live in a conservative city like that with Jerry Falwell and all of the Christian right there. But it was a wonderful opportunity. It was a great institution. I grew professionally and was able to leave there and go to Northern Virginia Community College, which was about 15 times larger,
Mhm.
with the same challenges, same headaches, just different names on the people involved.
Amen.
So, and even in the job I have currently, the challenges, I'm able to understand them because I experienced them twice as president. And so I can be sympathetic while still helping institutions understand how to survive and how to deal with the accreditation standards in spite of the pandemics and the budget cuts and all
Yeah,
the downward enrollments and all the other things that come along.
absolutely. And sex covers all colleges and universities in the southeast of the
We
United
have we
States?
have 11 institutions in 11 states from Texas to Virginia and Kentucky and everything south except Arkansas and West Virginia. And Arkansas and West Virginia used to be a part of our region, but back in the 30s, the K-12 division got upset about some policy change, so they left and the colleges went with them. And we do community colleges, state institutions, HBCUs, land grant institutions. If it's an associate degree or higher, we accredit it. We,
Excellent.
excuse me, we have public, private, and for-profit institutions.
Yep, that makes perfectly good sense. So what's the tickler of accreditation? So what's the thing that stands out most when institutions are looking for accreditation? Do they just fall back on their record of what they have done in previous years, or is it a new process every time they come up for accreditation?
They come up every 10 years, and we have a set of standards to which they have to demonstrate compliance. And within that 10-year period, we often tweak or totally revise our standards. So sometimes there's some new ones, or sometimes there are some nuances that have been implemented. For example, we have a standard on student achievement that encourages graduation rate increases and licensure increases and stuff. But this year, we've asked the institutions to disaggregate their data so that they can see which of their populations are not being successful and they can concentrate more on them.
Oh,
So, the standard is the same, but what we're asking them to do with it is different.
excellent. So how has COVID affected the work that you do, not just from an economic standpoint, but even from, whether they're in person or face to face or remotely?
We have moved all of our activities to a virtual platform. We had our annual meeting this past December in an annual platform, which scared me to death because what do you do with 4,000 people when they show up for a meeting? And as it turned out, we had 5,100 people show up for the meeting. So it turned out well. We got good feedback on it, but planning it in 60 days because you thought you were going to be able to go to Nashville, and then they say, no, we don't think we can accommodate all of you all here. It's like, oh, what do I do? Because that's our largest professional development activity for our institutions, but it's also a big hunk of my budget.
Mhm.
So, panic was about to set in. All of our visits are on site, are virtual, including our on site visits. We have did that in the summer and fall last year. We canceled the visits that had not been done last spring
Mhm.
and postponed their accreditation or extended their accreditation for a year. So they're coming up this spring, and we're going to do all of them virtually. Um, our board meetings have been virtual. I mean, everything we've done. I'm so tired of Zoom. I don't know what to do. It has been a godsend. I don't know how we could have accommodated it otherwise. Although there are times when I go, can't you just pick up the phone? You really don't have to see me. You can
Absolutely.
just pick up the phone. But and it's worked out well. I mean, our institutions were a little stressed because we literally look at everything at an institution, and it's tough to take a tour. When you are sitting in Atlanta or Chattanooga, and the institutions in Florida.
Yeah.
How do I tour that? But it's worked out very well, and I think that a lot of the angst that was there when we first started it has dissipated tremendously.
Absolutely. I think we all feel the same way about Zoom. We went from Cisco's WebEx to Zoom, and we're just looking, okay, my screen time is too much now, too much screen time. So I understand exactly. So when you consider accreditation for an institution, does the values that grant them accreditation matter whether they're large or small? So in other words, if we got 500 students or 5,000 students, does it change some?
We have one set of standards that we use to evaluate the effectiveness of all of our institutions, but we look at each institution independently and we look at the mission that they have. So if you've got a small private liberal arts institution, who's dedicated to serving women, like Spelman, for example, we will evaluate how well they're carrying out or complying with our standards, given their mission and their budget and their faculty and all that stuff. We would not compare University of Georgia the same way because it's a public institution and it's much larger, but the standards are the same.
Absolutely. That makes perfectly good sense.
I don't expect Spelman to have the same kind of budget that I expect University of Georgia to have, but I do expect them to live within their budget, just like I expect University of Georgia to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So is there any correlation to admissions and the accreditation process for students?
No,
No.
no. The institution decides who they're going to educate. We just go in and see how well you're going to do it. Do you have a policy that talks about admission? Are you living within that policy? If you're making exceptions, do you document them and have good rationale for making those exceptions? Those are the kinds of things that we see. Do you expect them to learn the same things that you do, every other student? So no. And if they come in academically underprepared in some areas, do you have ways to help them prepare to get up to snuff so that they can be successful in that institution?
Excellent. So how do you see online or remote learning that many institutions have had to go to in this COVID time? And even with your own organization, do you think that when we are all completely vaccinated and this virus is under control, we'll go back to more in person, or do you think we'll see a kind of a combo or hybrid of something of that nature?
Those are decisions that institutions will have to make. I think those that are residential institutions are chomping at the bit for the students to come back because part of their budget is based on room and board, and butts in the seats, as they say. We have always had online instruction.
Mhm.
For some institutions, it's a new concept. But I started in 1974 as a community college psychology faculty member, and we were doing distance learning and correspondence education way back in the dark ages. It's just that for many institutions, they have never, involved themselves with it, and the pandemic caused them to have to. And so they scrambled, and I mean, I cannot compliment our institutions enough for the professional development that they put in place very quickly, for the technology that many of them had to put in place very quickly because many of them weren't wired to do distance learning. But they know that the competencies that are expected of students on campus are the same competencies that are expected in an online environment, and that the support services that are available to students on campus are supposed to be available to students online. And so we look at it as a mode of delivery as opposed to anything else. I mean, again, we had classes outside sometimes when I was in college,
Right.
But it was still a college class, and we still had to learn the same kinds of things. So the same thing is true here. For some of our institutions, it's a struggle because this is the first time they've offered courses online, but they've stepped up and they've been talking to each other, which is like, oh my God, you finally heard me. This is not rocket science. Go ask somebody, you know. And so they have been partnering with other institutions and organizations that have the platforms and have the professional development stuff, and so it's going well.
Excellent. That's very good to know. So I wrote my dissertation on fully online courses and completion rates. And I still find that that's still a challenge for many students is to complete when everything you're doing is remote, because
It would be
sometimes
difficult for me because I depend too much on the energy, in a classroom where other people are around me. And when you want to say something, you can at least put up your hand and somebody will say it, or you can in a Zoom, environment, it's like, hello, remember me,
Yeah.
So it's strange, but and you have to be self-directed in order to be able to do that well, and many students are not. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's it's like anything else. The more you do it, the better you get, and so we'll see.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that, and is for most of my work it was a quantitative study, but there's a lot of qualitative values in that too, right? So the forums, the way you learn, we assume that everybody learns somewhat similar, when that's not the case, where a great number of people do not. So it's really interesting to see that, many of the students who, when I was on the university side, that I advised, still reach out to me today and ask me questions that I'm not exactly sure I'm prepared to answer. So I kind of redirect them to someone else who can answer it better. But I do understand the challenges that they feel, especially when they're being pressured to do, come on campus, or, take this lab, somewhere at some other school, trying to navigate that can be a bit disruptive.
Well, the other challenge too is everybody doesn't have access to internet at home.
Absolutely.
And you've got other people in the house where, when you're on campus studying, you can go to your room or the library and, find some peace and quiet. And some of our students go back home and they end up having childcare responsibilities.
Yep.
Parents have lost their job, or they figure, well, I can save some childcare because you're here every day. You can take care of them. And all of that interferes with the learning environment. So there are a lot of variables over which the institution has no control, but that definitely impact the student's learning.
Yeah. So one of the things that still perplexes me is diversity in higher education, and specifically, you know, who are the people that look like me, and how do I transcribe this into something that's legible to me? So I'm in a school and I am the only Black female in this class, and I feel alienated just in general, you know. And I know this is outside of your wheelhouse, but that kind of thing is one of those places where, I know that institutions are allowed to figure this out for themselves, but I don't know that they really fully understand their community if this is an issue that exists out there.
Yeah. That's not outside of my wheelhouse at all because I lived that. I went to an all-white high school. I was the only Black in my junior and senior classes in high school. There weren't but 25 of us out of 2,500 in undergraduate school. So trust me, I've lived it. I understand it. For me, however, it was empowering because I figured, well, I'm here. You're going to listen to what I have to say. I'm not going to sit back in the background and let you just run the conversation. But that's an individual thing that I think students have to get to that, that everybody's not at that particular point. I don't have never purported to speak for all Black females, but I have no problem sharing my viewpoint.
Absolutely.
But I think that there's some come to Jesus stuff going on right now because they realize that minorities are still having babies and the white population has stopped.
Yeah. or reduce
Or-
their numbers.
And so, yeah, that's right. If you want to keep your doors open, then you're going to find a way to, to educate minority students. The other population is the adult student. It is hysterical to see my senior institutions say, "Oh my God, there's an adult population out there. Maybe we should reach out to them." It's like I had a gentleman, 69 years old, in my first class I ever taught. And I'm going, "What am I going to teach you?" So yeah, it's an evolution and it's occurring, and they're realizing. And that was one of the reasons that the board asked that the institutions disaggregate those achievement data, because just because you got them in there doesn't mean you're going to get them out with some kind of degree, or certification or something. So it's a process.
Yeah.
Some are coming to it more willingly than others. Some are coming to it faster than others, but they're all getting there.
Yeah, I think that the long and short of this period of COVID really is going to impact a lot of people differently than they thought. So when you were going to campus and you had to butt in the chair, you did have some resources and, some colleagues that you could kind of collaborate with and kind of work through, issues with, people you could turn to if you didn't understand something, especially being Black. And I can say that specifically for myself. It isn't always easy to raise your hand and admit you don't know something or you didn't get what the professor said. Because there's some eyes staring at you, assuming you don't belong there, or there's some eyes staring at you, thinking that you are not smart enough to be here, or whatever their ideology are about people of color, that's there. And so, what I see a lot of is students struggling to find their voice
Yeah.
in a place where they feel voiceless, they feel invisible, they feel, less than, and they feel that over and over and over again.
Do you find that students who are at HBCUs, for example, who are just shy and don't want to admit they don't know, have the same challenge?
No,
Interesting.
so I did not get my first college degree until I was 42 years old, and I'm only 43 right now. So, and I have a doctorate degree, so I just want to make sure you understand the math there, right?
I understand.
Um,
Kind of like me
so
starting when I was 2. I got it.
exactly, exactly. But I think, and I talk to people about this a lot, the HBU experience is different than the predominantly white experience in so many ways. When I went to North Carolina Central. My name was Rochelle Newton. I was not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I was Rochelle Newton. Whatever was going on with me, whether it was with my family, whether it was with my own academic learning or whatever it is, I always felt I had someone I could go talk to, you know. And the people that looked like me had some of the same struggles that I did, So, didn't get this or didn't understand that. Whereas some of the younger people at that school that looked like me were very boisterous. They didn't mind raising their hands up and saying, "Can you say that again?" or "Can you repeat that?" Where, I was a little bit more timid because I didn't, I'm new at this. I don't know how this process works. But the young people seem to be not afraid. Now, that was the experience at North Carolina Central. When I went to East Carolina, it was a whole different matter. I was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I did not raise my hand. I sat in the back of the class so I could write slow and take my notes and stuff like that. And the other Black and brown people that were in that class were only Black females, no brown and no Black
Male.
males, and I think one brown male, but predominantly people in the class were white. And
Mhm.
I can tell you, being as old as I was, I had one of the white male students walk over to me and said, "You'll never get your doctorate. You're not that smart enough." He said this to me on the first day of class, right? And so I'm the kind of person, let me prove you wrong, so I'm going to show you I can. And so myself
Could
and
have
one
been
white,
invitation to your graduation. That's what I would have done.
no, no,
I would've.
myself and one white female are the only two who finished in 4 years. We did our classes, we did our course, end of our degree courses, and we did our ABD in 4 years. Only two. And so but you have to have some will to fight in order to overcome that. For Black and brown people, specifically in very elite, predominantly white institutions, having that voice is dangerous, because if I push too hard, it's going to have a recourse. If I don't push hard enough, I'm not going to get there. So what I found in my experiences is they connect with each other, and they
Mhm.
find their safe space with each other as opposed to the larger group. And that's, to me, the thing that, higher education is not really appreciated, that they create these little small communities. I don't know if you remember the book wow, the black kids sitting together in the cafeteria because they don't have any place else to sit,
Every
they don't.
day, that's right.
Right. So, and I think that, when you mentioned that, you see them changing, I would just really be interested to see what that really looks like when there is a vaccine for COVID and we've gone back to some sort of normalcy, because I really don't see that anywhere where I am.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think that, I don't know a lot about this, but, I work in IT and I've been in this field for 40 plus years. And I talk to a lot of CIOs and people who run higher ed institutions. And it's amazing how few Black and brown people lead IT organizations, whether in liberal arts or, elite privates and publics and whatever. It's a very, very small number. And although we're all singing Kumbaya toward diversity, but we're not practicing it the same way.
There are a lot of fields that we still have not infiltrated.
Yep. And
Uh,
I think the thing is really interesting about that is, if there is no oversight, what's the criteria to make you do it? So what I do know is that, students can decide not to come to your college. That's one of the answers to that. They just don't go there. But in a lot of times they don't know it until they get there.
yeah.
And once you've laid that check down on the table, it's kind of hard to pick it up and ask for it back.
But interestingly, the HBCU enrollments have been going up
Yes,
largely because of the racial unrest, at our PWIs, and students going, I don't need to stay here and take this abuse. I don't need to have you come tell me I'll never graduate.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it will be interesting, no
It
doubt.
really will, and I think that in this age of time, with the death of Mr. Floyd, and I'm still in awe by the fact that people are shocked by that. Like, that's been going on forever. His was just one of many, although it was in the middle of a pandemic. Maybe we had more time to look at TV or talk about it, But now you hear everybody talking about diversity.
Yep,
Every single
yep.
person is talking about diversity. They're hiring diversity officers. They're doing all these things, but they're not putting any diversity actions in place, right?
Yeah.
They're just talking about it and, hiring a diversity officer, take a conference. Like yesterday, I don't know how many emails I saw about MLK Day from people who, I didn't know what the world to make of what they said, but they were talking about that. Like, do you actually know what he was talking about? Do you
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
recognize what he was saying? Because we're
Or better
still
still,
there.
what do you do the other 364 days during the year?
Exactly, right?
Mm,
And so I wrote something yesterday about that. He said, I dream the day when my four little children will be judged by the
not
content of
by
their
color.
character
Yeah,
and not the color of their skin. But we are still judged by the color of our skin, more, sometimes more subtly, but it's still there. It's still there. And I hope higher ed changes, and recognizes the important role that they have to play, but they can't believe they're only educating the brightest and the smartest, and in some cases the whitest. They're all of us that are coming to this door. And one last thing I'll say about that is, like, how many Black and brown kids walk in the door seeking a STEM degree and end up with a liberal arts degree because they didn't realize the rigor, or they weren't prepared in high school for the rigor of higher education.
it has been very interesting to me to watch the number of African Americans who are being hired as president at predominantly white institutions. That never would have happened 20 years ago, for example.
Yeah.
Not in the large numbers that are happening nowadays. So there's hope. Don't give up.
Oh, I believe me, I'm not. These chats are my fights. There are people can hear, other people's views, experiences, and kind of grow from them. I hope that they take them as some kind of message to learn, because I don't know. I'm Black and I still don't know everything there's to know about diversity. I'm still learning
sure.
about this.
Sure.
So I don't put myself out there to be an expert at all, but I do put myself out there to be willing to contribute to the narrative, in whatever way I can. And to hear other people's stories. Like, it's so important that we hear your story, because I think what you said to us at the beginning, I mean, like, most of us know that, right? Know how hard the start was. But then you get to a place where, instead of trying to, shift the car into first gear, you're in drive and you're cruising up the highway, And so that's your story. I mean, you struggle, but now you figured out and you're there. And that's a message for a lot of young people, in regards of their ethnicity, to know that you can do this.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was interesting because when I first went to for looking for employment, I went to a community college in San Antonio that had that is an HBCU. And I knew everybody who worked there because they had gone to school with my mother or church with my grandmother, except the chairwoman of the psych department was a white female who told me she had one black woman working for her. She didn't need another one. Try the other college. So I went to the other college. They didn't have one. They hired me on the spot. I mean, so you just never know, and you have to take those situations and make lemonade out of lemons is
Amen.
what you do, and just don't get upset about it. Just say, okay, fine. Thank you for the lead, and I'll go over there and see what comes of it. So
Absolutely.
it's yeah. But I was young and stupid and didn't know any better at that particular point. Probably now I would have, filed an EEOC suit or something.
And speaking of that, I think the problem with those, because someone reached out to me in early 2019 and says she was interested in filing a suit. She was an Indian woman and she was interested in filing a suit against her institution because she had not been given the put on tenure track. And I said to her, like you have a very big wallet or you have a very wealthy benefactor because you're not going to outlast them if you're by yourself. You've got to do a class act, or as an individual, you can't outlast them, no matter who is in the wrong. You can't outlast them. And I think that's one of the problems in a lot of organizations, not just higher ed, is that when you run up against discrimination, having the resource to fight it back, because we've got all these wonderful federal laws now that support diversity and discrimination and all that stuff. And I mean support meaning giving you avenues to address it. But in a lot of ways too, it's a mountain to climb as well.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
It is.
absolutely. And I think that thing that you said about the woman saying we already got one, that's such a, that's still true today.
I know. I
That's
know.
not 2010 or 20, whatever it was. It's still happening today,
Yep. Yep.
There was a woman who wrote an article in the Washington Post, I think it was in 2018. She said the reason why we don't have more Black faculty and administrators is because we don't want them. She said simply we don't want them. And that was really eye-opening. And I shared that with a lot of people because it was really interesting to hear somebody be that, open about this. We don't want to hire people of color. It's not like we're not, we don't find them, because that's the standard response. We can't find any good
Don't
people to
know it.
hire.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's
Yeah.
such crap. You never heard of such much crap. But you accept that that's the story that they tell and that's the lens that they see the world. So okay, well, let's go with that. But in reality, as you said, universities are doing more to hire Black presidents and stuff like that. But I still say the plight of the Black woman is still a tough road to hoe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's getting better. We certainly showed our power in this election.
Absolutely. And I hope that means that that's a win. But the question is, do we have to rebuild the road every
I
time? Do we
know.
have to
I
go back and
know.
restart all over every
Yeah.
time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hopefully not.
yeah, hopefully not.
Mhm.
I come to find that, when you're dealing with, specifically in my case with my son. So my son goes to a school here in North Carolina. And it's really interesting how the leadership approaches its interaction with its families and its students. You get the nice, lovely email telling you to contribute to the alumni fund, make payments. But when you have a problem, you get this deaf ear, right? They can't hear, they can't speak, they don't know their phone numbers, they can't respond to email. And you're constantly fighting this battle. Why am I paying you all this money to be invisible? And so you've got this place where your son is now committed to the school, but you're not,
Yeah.
so, and you can't win that, right? So, you take him out and put him somewhere else, he might not do as well. If keep him there, he might struggle. It's just one of those things where I think that we are in such a diverse world of ideas and thoughts about how we do things that we sometimes miss the mark. Because if your sole role is to educate people, that's what you should be doing. And you should do it regardless of what color they are, what gender or sexual orientation they are. Shouldn't
Sure.
matter, but it does. Absolutely does.
Yep. Yep.
So where do you see higher ed going, you know, on the other side of COVID with the disruption of technology? Where do you see this cycle going?
I think we're going to try to get back to where we were before the pandemic because that's where we're most comfortable. That is what we with which we are most familiar. But I think what you'll see is more micro awards or credentials that
Mhm.
are coming out so that people can get right into the workforce. I think that you're going to find, hopefully, you will find a greater willingness to accept transfer credits, so that students don't have to repeat courses and take so long to get out. I'm hopeful that you'll see those articulation agreements with senior institutions and community colleges, so that if a student matriculates through an associate degree program, then they can transfer over, be juniors, and don't have to go back and repeat those courses. I mean, I see more of a willingness to work together than ever before.
That's-
Um, but I don't know if that'll happen in my work life.
yeah. Yeah, I understand that completely. I think one of the interesting pieces that I struggle with in this space is, so um, while we are in the middle of this pandemic, you have institutions of higher learning are requiring students to come on campus because they can't take a lab digitally, or they can't, do something that they need to do that normally has been done in person,
Right.
and then subjecting those people to whatever is out there. One young woman called me Sunday and said, they want me to come back. What do I do? I'm like, well, first you find out.
So many of them are offering COVID testing. They are, they've taken the CARES money they got from the federal government. They've cleaned everything. And so I don't think they're bringing them back into situations that are necessarily harmful to them. It's not the campus environment, because they've done all they can there. It's what happens when I go to town. What if I
Right,
go off and go, and college students don't want to be, locked down on campus. They want
right,
to be able to roam around, and that's the danger. I
right.
don't think it, but I mean, I don't know that they're verbalizing it that way, but from what I know of what institutions have done to safeguard their students, it's not the campuses that are creating the challenges. It's people coming onto campus, or students going off campus and then coming back, that raises the stakes.
Absolutely. When I think about Black and Brown communities, though, we have more comorbidities in our families. We have families that are at risk. So when you ask us to come back, does that mean we're never going home, or by the time we go home, our families will have the vaccine or something?
That that
So
is that is the challenge. Yeah, it is. Yeah, and
absolutely.
multi-generational families, in one house is also the challenge.
Absolutely. And in a lot of ways, we're kind of stuck in this place trying to navigate this. I mean, like, we're learning it all together. It's not like it's like, there was a handbook for this, although they probably should have been a handbook for this. We're learning it together because I mean, like, surely back when I was a child, which was only a couple of weeks ago, we had to get the polio shot. We had to go into little shelters because, they thought Soviet Union was going to bomb us. We had all this planning for all these things that could happen.
Yep.
And I'm like, we've got lax about that. We haven't really been serious about, what could go wrong.
Those young people who were in the Capitol the other day said that they learned how to get down under their desk, because of school and
Yeah.
teaching you in school how to, get down. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a lot. It's a lot to learn. Yeah.
it is. It
I,
is.
Belle, I cannot tell you how thankful I am that you did this talk with me. It's very good. I know how busy you are and how many
Oh, it's
things
my
you're on.
pleasure. My
Well,
pleasure.
it's absolutely exceptional. It's wonderful to have you and my friend in my network. So I'm very glad about that. So we have about 5 minutes. I'm going to leave the remainder of time to you to talk about whatever you wish to talk about.
Aren't you kind? I'm hopeful that students don't get turned off because of the pandemic to learning. I'm hopeful that we make the assumption that students are this technology generation, and yet they don't necessarily use it to learn anything. They use it to communicate with their friends. And so we did make the assumption, I think, that because they are familiar with technology, that moving to distance learning was not going to be a challenge for them. But we have found out that truly it is, for lots of different reasons. Being self-directed is tough when you've not had to be self-directed before. And as I said, I personally would not like taking an online class because I cannot find out too many other things I could be doing rather than sitting in front of a computer. Especially if I'm at home. So there are challenges, but I do think that our institutions have risen to the challenge, and I am so proud of all of them, because it's not been easy when you have faculty who've been there for a long time and they're used to doing things the way they do them, to have to uproot them, not just, in the fall semester, but in the middle of the spring semester,
Absolutely.
to make that transition. And they have all just stepped up to the plate and gotten it done. So I can't sing their praises enough. I really can't. And I'm hopeful that it won't last that much longer. I've been frustrated lately because I'm over 65 and trying to get that vaccine. And if they had just asked me how to set it up, I could have told them. But putting up appointments one day at a time, it's not going to work. There's some of us who plan ahead. We have lives, and even though we're working at home, we still have lives. And at least give me 2-3 days from which to choose. So it's just crazy, but we will get through it. We will go kicking and screaming, but we will get through it. And hopefully by the fall, we'll be back in some semblance of familiarity.
Well, I thank you very much for that. And I also want to tell you how much it means to have you in your role and be the person that you are.
Thank
A
you.
perfect role model, a perfect example of what leadership looks like,
You're kind.
fair, understanding, but but a realist, a realist. And that's hard to find because you have people that are kind of modulating both sides. So they're trying to be fair or be real. And sometimes the message they put out is not authentic, so
Because it's hard to do as well.
well, you do it well, girl. You do it
Thank
well.
you.
Yeah,
After 16 years, I hope so.
yeah, absolutely. You do it very well. And I thank you very much for this. And I'm hoping sometime before the year's over, you'll come back and chat with me again after you're back in the building and tell me how that's going.
Look forward to it.
Thank you so much, Belle.
All right,
Take
my
care,
dear.
be safe, and I hope you get your shot soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Bye-bye.